Hello, and welcome to episode 23 of the Yes You Coaching podcast. I'm your host, Anna Manning, and today we're going to be talking about acting versus being yourself. But first, I want to invite you to a free class that I'm running in January 23. And you might think it's early for booking this, but I'm just letting you know ahead of the holiday time so that you just can switch your head off and think about nice other things during the Christmas holidays. So the class is designed to be a one-stop shop for anybody who is thinking or wanting to grow their confidence in 2023. So when I talk about growing confidence, it will focus on growing your professional confidence. So growing your confidence in your job, in your role, within your organization or within your business. But it will also pan out wider than that and help you within your personal life too. So the class is basically a combination of what I know works when it comes to confidence building after coaching hundreds and hundreds of people on the same things over and over again. I've really thought hard about this and distilled it into a 60-minute class so that you can create your own plan which focuses on the things that you need to work on. So when you're listening to this podcast, it's generic stuff, right? Which I know can get in the way of confidence building, can help with confidence building. But in this class, you'll really be able to hone in and think about what's relevant to you and plan for what's relevant to you so that you can really nail your confidence building in 2023. All welcome, all invited. So also feel free to share this with your networks. The link is in the show notes. Go ahead and book yourself in now. There are 2 dates in January, the 4th and the 26th. Choose whichever one works best for you, and I will see you in class. If you can't attend live because you're away or whatever, then sign up anyway and you'll get the recording in your inbox. Okay, so this week we're talking about acting versus being yourself. And quite a few years ago now, I was in a play, like an amateur dramatics type play, where I was cast as an old lady. And the actual old lady who was meant to be playing the part, Betty, God rest her soul, had died. So they thought, right, who can we get in at the last minute who can play an old lady? God knows why they thought of 27-year-old me, but there you have it, they did. So I was cast, stage left, 27-year-old Anna as an old lady, and I had an old man husband as my sidekick to go with me. Now, he was actually a lot older than me, but I had to play this old lady. So my brothers and sisters have called me grandma since I was a kid, and they used to say it to me in this pretty mean voice because I used to go to bed early. I used to get laughed at a lot for that. So I was like, I've got this one nailed. I've been called grandma since I was a kid, so surely I can actually pretend to be a grandma. I was like, I reckon I can do this. But it turns out consistently acting like an old lady is extremely difficult. Honestly, I had to put so much energy into every second I was on stage, remembering to like stoop over a bit, remembering to kind of shuffle instead of walk. And I even had to work out how to do a full dance routine in old lady style. It was absolutely exhausting. And even when I thought, yeah, I'm really getting into this now, like I'm really in character. I've really nailed it. A friend of mine who came to watch the play said the very funniest bit was I snapped out of character, apparently. Obviously, my brain was somewhere else. And I just did something as a 27-year-old. Like, I must have just stood upright and done something as a 27-year-old. And then I obviously, like, seconds later, realized that I needed to get back into character. And suddenly I was a grandma again. And she was like, that was the funniest bit of the whole thing. Obviously, not my jokes weren't that funny, but unintentionally, the funniest bit was when I'd had dropped the act, as it were, and I became myself again. And I thought, you know what? Acting is a lot harder than it looks. But why am I telling you this story about me acting as a grandma? Well, I want you to consider this. What percentage of your time do you spend acting at work? What percentage of time are you playing a role which isn't quite you? What percentage of time are you kind of pretending to be a little bit more like someone you're not? A little while ago, I had a new client and she told me that she just wanted to stop acting at work. That was her main goal. She just wanted to be able to show up as herself. And she told me this in the first kind of consult call that we had. And I was curious about this. And I said, what do you think would happen if you stopped acting and just showed up at work as yourself? And she thought for a minute and she gave me this beautiful answer, which I wrote down. She said, whatever I say, I would say it with less qualifiers. I won't worry so much about what other people think of me all the time. I won't feel so much self-doubt. I'd be calmer and more efficient. I think my leadership would be better because, people can sense it when you aren't being yourself. And I would be more in control and think less. And I'd probably be able to close my mind when I close my laptop at the end of the day instead of playing things over and over in my mind and just enjoy life things. I think it would feel nice. I think I'd have space for more enjoyment because I'd be feeling less anxious. Now, I recorded that and wrote it in an email at the time with her permission. And it was a beautiful answer, but it was also really good intuition on her part. Because what she described is exactly what I see happens for clients when they stop acting and actually start being themselves. When we are acting, when you are acting, when any of us are acting a part at work, why are we doing that? I think it's mostly because we subtly believe that somehow we have to appear a certain way, we have to be a certain way, and maybe that way is slightly different than the way we actually are. Maybe we're not quite trusting that the way we are is actually fine, and it's fine to show up as we are, and we have to kind of subtly manipulate other people's impression of us by playing a part, by acting. And, I'm not kind of talking about all of us are different in different scenarios, right? If I'm talking to a 5-year-old, I might be subtly different than if I'm in front of a magistrate, right, in court, and I'm talking to them. I could do that as me every time, or I could be acting in both. What this client said was that she was aware that the persona she kind of had on when she was acting, it wasn't quite her. And we're afraid sometimes that if we are who we are, that's not going to be right, or that's not going to be good enough, or that's just somehow not going to be acceptable. I don't think any of this is conscious. I think it's unconscious. I don't think we get up in the morning and say, right, I'm going to put on this costume and I'm going to be acting at work today. Right? I don't think anyone does that. I think it's a lot more subtle than that. But maybe we fear being ourselves. This client was right when she said, my leadership would be better. I would feel more in control and I would think less and I would close my laptop at the end of the day and I would enjoy life things more. That is what happens in my experience when clients feel able to start being themselves instead of acting. The very thing that they fear, i.e., being themselves, is the very thing that really works. And you may doubt me on this. You may want to argue with me and be like, no, I'm sure it's great for everybody else to be themselves, but yeah, I'm just not sure about me, and I think it would be better if I kept acting at work. Or maybe this isn't you. maybe this is some people that are around you. Maybe this is members of your team. Maybe this is staff. But I want to explore with you a few of the reasons why I think being yourself instead of acting is actually the sweetest way you could be. And the first reason is because if you're being yourself rather than acting, you don't have to remember the script. You don't have to remember all the right words and how you're supposed to be saying them. You don't have to endlessly think about what you're doing and how you're doing it and what everybody else is thinking about it and how they're perceiving you. Just like me as the old lady, you don't have to stay in character. You don't have to remember the script when you're being yourself. Acting is hard. But if you're being yourself, you don't have to remember the script. There are no exact right words or way to say them. There's just what you do, which comes from who you are and how you are. The second reason I think it's really the sweetest way is being yourself rather than acting is because when you are yourself rather than acting, there is space in your brain to just be good at what you are doing, to focus on what you are doing. So I found when I was acting as the old lady that it took a lot of my energy and attention to be in character, to be someone else. And you might find that if you're acting or playing a role at work, that it takes a lot of your energy and your focus because you've got to keep it up. You can't let the mask slip. It's like 24/7. And when you stop acting, you'll find that you get so much more space inside your brain to just be, to actually be present. And guess what happens when you're more present? You just say the thing you want to say without second guessing yourself. You can actually connect with people in the room instead of focusing on what's going on in your head. And you can, I call it think as you go. Do you remember pay as you go mobile phones? Do they still have? I'm sure they still have those, in fact. I'm sure they still have those. This is not pay as you go. This is think as you go. So when you're constantly acting and having to play a role and not letting the mask slip, you have to focus your attention on that. And it is harder to use your executive functions. So you might find that you have more of a kind of frozen brain. When someone asks you a question, you might find that your brain is more of a blank. When you don't have to act, when you're just present and calm as yourself in the moment, you can listen to what someone's saying and you can think about it. You can use your executive functions, synthesize all that complex information and give your answer. The third reason why I think it's sweeter to be yourself rather than act is that people get to see who you really are. Not the kind of acting version of you, like not the version of you that you've brought to the stage that day, but just you. And when people get to see who you really are, that's when connection comes. Yes, it is more vulnerable to be yourself because you risk maybe other people not liking it, and you risk showing yourself for who you really are. But with that risk comes more reward. When people can see who you really are, it engages people and it connects you with people. So you'll be able to build relationships more easily when you're being yourself instead of acting. And I guess a lot of us will put on an act because we think people will like us more. But in my experience, people like people like us less when we're acting because there's that subtle feeling, right? There's that subtle knowing that someone isn't quite being themselves. Have you ever experienced this at work when it's just a bit, the energy is just a bit off? And this might sound a bit woo-woo to you, but you can feel it, you can sense it. Even if you're not sure, you're like, I'm not really sure what was going on there. Remember my new client from the beginning who said she just wanted to stop acting at work? She said, I'd be calmer and more efficient, and I think my leadership would be better because, people can sense it when you aren't being yourself. And she was right. It blocks connection when you aren't being yourself because who are they really connecting with? You're disconnected from yourself, so how could they be connected with you? So if you're in an industry that requires, and most of us are, if you're in an industry that requires connection, whether that's within your teams, with your staff, with clients, to build new relationships, networking, being yourself rather than acting will work better to build those relationships because it's being built on a foundation of reality rather than fakeness. The fourth reason why I think being yourself rather than acting is a good idea is that it saves energy. Think about me as the old lady in that play. My God, it was extremely tiring. Now, if I'd have just been walking around on a very small stage for, an hour and having conversations, I'm guessing that I wouldn't have felt that tired at the end of it. But stooping over, being an old lady, trying to remember not to step out of character, not letting the mask slip, remembering all the lines, thinking about how everyone was perceiving, exhausting. Exhausting. So if you're able to just drop the act and be yourself, imagine the energy you'll have to do other things. And you know what? I'm sure that your life and your work life is tiring enough without devoting your precious energy and your precious brain space to having to keep up and act. Imagine what you could do with all that energy. And the fifth reason why I think it's sweeter to be yourself rather than act, and my favorite reason, is because when you're being yourself rather than acting, your confidence will grow. It's an interesting, what's the word when you, can I think of the word? Maybe not. Maybe, no, I can't think of the word. It's something like a juxtaposition, but actually, I don't even know if that's right. When we think about confidence building and when we think about being confident, we so often think about kind of puffing ourselves up and putting on an act. We think about power dressing and like power stancing and all of those kinds of things. But that is not where confidence is built. That is a focus on the outside. That is a focus on the external. That is a focus on looking rather than feeling confident. And yeah, doing that might get you, like, bluff you through a situation where you're quite scared. And you might have to do that sometimes. All of us probably have to do that sometimes. But that isn't really where confidence is built. Confidence happens on the inside. Think about this. What happens when you're really accepted for who you are within a relationship? Whether that's a work relationship, a friendship, a partnership. Now, I've had previous relationships where I was sort of acting. I don't think that I thought I was acting, But I think I was subtly kind of playing the role of the person that I thought the other person would like, and it never worked. It left me unsure and exhausted and lonely, really. It left me like without connection. And of course it did, because who would the person have connected to? And maybe you've experienced this, right? Maybe you've been in a relationship where you, even if it's, whoever it's with, where you just never really felt like you could be yourself, you never really were yourself. And when you finish spending time with that person or those people, you are exhausted. Now, I think the reason that I was kind of acting in that relationship was because I thought, and this wasn't conscious, but I thought this is a more like acceptable, lovable version of myself that I'm pretending to be. And I know it sounds really sad, actually, when I think about it now. Thank God I'm not in a relationship like that anymore. But when I'm acting, when I'm doing that within a relationship, I'm sort of subtly telling myself that I'm not really acceptable or lovable the way I am. I have to put on this sort of persona. I have to act in order to be acceptable and to be lovable. And how does it feel to be told that you're not acceptable and you're not quite lovable the way you are? Therefore, it would be better if you kind of acted like somebody else. That sucks. We subtly do that to ourselves. But imagine if somebody else did it to you. They were like, do you know what? I don't think you're quite acceptable the way you are. And I think it would be better if you acted slightly more like this. You should act slightly more like that guy. That's what you need to do. If that was you within a relationship and you were told that, you would either leave, or if you stayed, you would have your confidence eventually in tatters. Now, I know you might think this has got a bit heavy, but I really want you to think about this. If you're acting at work, what is it you're subtly thinking isn't acceptable about the way you are, so that it would just be okay to show up as you? I think it can be a dichotomy with confidence building. Maybe that's the word I was going for earlier. I think it can be a dichotomy with confidence building in that when we take the view that we aren't as confident as we quote unquote should be within our role, we don't want anyone to know that. And therefore, we kind of bluff the confidence. We kind of subtly act as somebody who's different than who we actually are. Because we wouldn't want anybody to know that we weren't as confident as we think we should be. We wouldn't want anyone to know that we're nervous. We don't want anyone to see what's going on our insides. But telling ourselves that we need to act and not allowing ourselves to actually be seen for who and how we are is no way to build confidence. Yes, it might take a bit of work if you've been acting for a long time, or even in certain environments or just in certain relationships. It might take a bit of work to learn how to be yourself. But the acting is actually taking a lot of work too. So the way I see it, you've actually got two options. You can keep doing the work of acting, or you can do the work to drop the act. Either way is going to take work, right? You can keep doing the work of acting, or you can do the work to drop the act. Imagine if you could just stop acting and learn finally, or just allow yourself to be yourself. If you feel like, I'm not sure whether that's an acceptable, okay thing for me to do, here is your permission slip from the universe. You can stop acting and be yourself. It's okay for you to do that. Now, does that mean you might want to be all of yourself in every scenario? No, you might not. There may well be bits of you that you keep private, that you don't share, that you don't want on the outside. Fine. But where could you drop the act? Who could you drop the act with and just see what happens when you do? Usually when clients start working with me on this stuff, they're so afraid of dropping the act. They're like, I've been doing this for so long. I thought it was necessary. What on earth will happen if people, see me and they know me and they see that everything isn't, 100% and perfect all the time? It's like, well, could you test it out? Is it worth a go in order to help you feel more comfortable and eventually to help your confidence and for you to spend less energy on acting all the time? And sometimes people will try it out in low risk scenarios first. So if you've been doing a lot of acting, where's do you think could be the safest place for you to give it a go, being more yourself? Just relaxing and dropping the act. Maybe you can pick somewhere and then just use it as a bit of a test and be like, okay, what happened? So I thought it was going to be really bad. I thought it was going to be kind of dangerous, even if that's a subconscious thought. But actually, was it? Was it bad? Did anything bad happen? Was it dangerous? You don't have to jump in the deep end of the pool, right? You can put a toe in at once before you completely get in. A massive part of feeling confident from the inside comes from knowing that it's actually okay to be who you are. It's actually the best way for you to be. If you want to learn how to stop acting and be yourself more, come and take the class with us, the Grow Your Confidence in 2023 class. Let's find out where and why you're still acting so that you can stop and find out the kind of confidence that can be built and the energy that you'll have when you can be yourself rather than acting. The link for the class is in the show notes. You're very welcome to come and join us. I'll also put my email address down there. I'm always happy to hear from people who listen to the podcast and who are in the podcast community. And I mean that. I'll drop my email in there and I would love to hear from you. If the podcast has been useful to you, if it's helped you in any way, if there's anything that you've taken and actually applied and tried and it's either worked or hasn't worked, let me know. I'd love to hear from you. I will see you in next week's episode. Until then, have a lovely week. Bye.